What if the person you loved most in the world turned against you in an instant? For Ethan Caldwell, that person was his mother, Senator Margaret Caldwell, the woman who once called him her golden son. Now, as he stood on the edge of a truth that could unravel everything, he wondered if love could ever mend what fear and power had broken. Ethan's life had always been a performance. Growing up in the pristine suburbs of Virginia, under the shadow of his mother's rising political career, he learned early to smile for the cameras, shake hands with strangers, and bury his doubts beneath a polished exterior. Senator Caldwell was a conservative icon, a beacon of family values with a smile as sharp as her rhetoric. To the world, Ethan was her pride and joy of a league bound. Charming, the embodiment of the American dream. But beneath the surface, Ethan carried a secret that gnawed at him like a splinter under his skin. He was gay, and he was falling in love. It was the summer of 2023, and Ethan, then 22, was home from Yale for the season. The Caldwell estate, a sprawling colonial mansion, buzzed with the usual flurry of campaign events and fundraisers. Margaret's re-election loomed, and Ethan was expected to play his part, stand by her side, wave to the crowds, and embody the perfect son. But every night, as he lay in his childhood bedroom, his thoughts drifted to Lucas Bennett, a quiet, introspective artist he'd met at a local coffee shop in Alexandria. Lucas was everything Ethan wasn't allowed to be, unapologetically himself. With tousled brown hair, piercing green eyes, and a sketchbook always tucked under his arm, Lucas moved through the world with a kind of freedom Ethan envied. Their first meeting had been accidental: a spilled latte, a nervous laugh, and a conversation that stretched until the shop closed. By the end of that summer, stolen moments in Lucas's tiny apartment or quiet walks along the Potomac had become Ethan's lifeline. For the first time, he felt seen, not as the senator's son, but as himself. But how could Ethan reconcile this love with the expectations crushing him? His mother's campaign was built on a platform that vilified people like him. Her speeches, laced with coded language about traditional values, left no room for ambiguity. Coming out to her wasn't just a personal risk, it was a grenade lobbed into the heart of her political empire. Could he live with the fallout? Could he afford not to? As the summer wore on, Ethan's secret grew heavier. He and Lucas stole moments whenever they cootled late-night drives, whispered conversations under the stars, a kiss that felt like defiance. But the walls of Ethan's world were closing in. Margaret began to notice his absences, his distracted smiles. "You're not yourself, Ethan," she'd say, her voice laced with suspicion. He brushed it off. But the fear was real. What would happen when she learned the truth? One evening, at a glittering fundraiser in D.C., Ethan's worlds collided. Lucas, invited as a friend, stood awkwardly among the tuxedoed elite, his paint-stained jeans a stark contrast to the polished crowd. Ethan's heart raced as he watched his mother approach Lucas, her smile tight and calculating. "So, you're the artist," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. Lucas held his ground, but Ethan saw the flicker of unease in his eyes. That night, as they drove back to Alexandria, Lucas asked the question Ethan had been dreading. "Are you ever going to tell her?" The question hung between them like a guillotine. Ethan wanted to say yes, to promise a future where they could be open, but the words caught in his throat. How do you choose between the person you love and the family you've always known? What does it mean to be honest when honesty could destroy everything? Lucas deserved an answer, but Ethan wasn't sure he had one. By the end of August, the tension was unbearable. Ethan's phone buzzed constantly with messages from his mother's campaign team schedules, speeches, appearances. But his heart was elsewhere, tangled in Lucas's quiet strength, in the way he made Ethan feel alive. One night, as they sat on a park bench overlooking the river, Lucas took Ethan's hand and said, "I'm not asking you to choose me over her. I'm asking you to choose yourself." Those words burned into Ethan's soul. What did it mean to choose himself? Could he even imagine a life outside his mother's shadow? The first cracks in Ethan's facade appeared at a family dinner. Margaret, fresh from a campaign rally, was in high spirits, regaling the table with stories of her latest victories. Ethan, quieter than usual, pushed his food around his plate. When his mother asked what was wrong, the words slipped out before he could stop them. "I'm seeing someone." The table fell silent. Margaret's smile froze. "Who is she?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. Ethan's heart pounded. Should he lie? Should he tell her now? What would it cost him to speak the truth? The moment passed, and Ethan mumbled something vague about a friend. But the seed was planted. Margaret's eyes lingered on him, sharp and searching. He knew she wouldn't let it go. As he lay awake that night, Ethan wrestled with the question that would define his future. Could he be the son his mother wanted and the man he needed to be? Or would the truth force him to choose? The air in the Caldwell mansion felt heavier after that dinner. Ethan's half-confession hung like a storm cloud, and Margaret's probing glances grew sharper. She didn't ask again about the friend, but her silence was worse. It was the kind of silence that demanded answers. Ethan felt like a tightrope walker, one misstep away from a fall he couldn't survive. How long could he keep this up? How do you hide a love that feels like your only truth? Lucas, meanwhile, was a quiet anchor in the chaos. They met in secret, stealing moments in out-of-the-way diners or under the cover of dusk in quiet parks. Lucas never pushed, but his presence was a question in itself. When will you be ready? Ethan wanted to be ready, but the fear of his mother's reaction off losing her, her approval, her world kept him tethered to silence. What does it mean to love someone when that love could cost you everything? One afternoon, as Ethan helped his mother prepare for a campaign event, she cornered him in her study. "You've been distant," she said, her voice low but edged with steel. "If there's something you're not telling me, Ethan, now's the time." Her eyes, so like his own, bored into him. For a moment, he considered telling her, imagined the words spilling out, the weight lifting. But then he saw the campaign posters on her desk, her face beaming under slogans like, "Protect our values." Could he trust her to love him if he wasn't her golden son anymore? Instead, he deflected, promising to focus more on the campaign. But the lie felt like a betrayal not just of himself, but of Lucas. That night, as they lay together in Lucas's apartment, Ethan confessed his fear. "She'll never accept me," he whispered. Lucas traced circles on his hand, his voice soft but firm. "You don't need her permission to be who you are." Those words were a lifeline, but they also sharpened the question. Could Ethan find the courage to face his mother's wrath? The turning point came at a rally in Richmond. Ethan stood backstage, watching Margaret deliver a speech that electrified the crowd. Her words were sharp, condemning deviant lifestyles and promising to protect the sanctity of family. Each syllable felt like a knife in Ethan's chest. He glanced at Lucas, who had come to support him, standing quietly in the shadows. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Ethan knew he couldn't keep hiding. But how do you stand up to someone who holds your world in their hands? What does it cost to claim your own truth? After the rally, Ethan found himself alone with his mother in her campaign bus. The air was thick with unspoken tension. "You've been off," she said, not looking at him. "If there's something going on, Ethan, you need to tell me. We can't afford distractions." Her words were a warning, but they also sparked something in him, a flicker of defiance. "What if I'm not who you think I am?" he asked, his voice trembling. Margaret's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "What does that mean?" she demanded. The question hung between them, unanswered. Could he say it? Could he risk everything? He didn't. Not then. But the moment left a crack in his resolve, one that widened with every passing day. Lucas, sensing the shift, began to push gently. "You don't have to do this alone," he said one evening as they walked through a quiet neighborhood. "But you can't keep living for her." Ethan knew he was right, but the fear was paralyzing. What would it mean to lose his mother's love? Could he survive being erased from her world? As September approached, the campaign intensified, and so did Margaret's scrutiny. She began asking pointed questions about Ethan's friend, her tone laced with suspicion. One night, she found a sketch Lucas had drawn of Ethna Tinder portrait tucked into his jacket pocket. "Who is this boy?" she demanded, holding the sketch like evidence of a crime. Ethan's heart stopped. He stammered, unable to lie, but too afraid to tell the truth. Margaret's face hardened. "We'll talk about this later," she said, her voice cold as ice. What did she suspect? How much time did Ethan have before the truth came out? The pressure was suffocating. Ethan began to pull away from Lucas, not because he loved him less, but because he couldn't bear the thought of dragging him into the storm. Lucas, hurt but patient, gave him space. "I'll wait," he said, his voice breaking. But not forever. Those words haunted Ethan as he navigated his mother's world, a world that felt increasingly like a cage. Could he break free? What would it take to choose love over fear? By the end of part 2, Ethan stood at a crossroads. The truth was clawing its way to the surface, and he knew he couldn't hide much longer. His mother's empire, built on control and image, was about to face its greatest challenge not from an opponent, but from her own son. What happens when the person you love most becomes your greatest threat? How do you find the strength to stand in your truth when it could cost you everything? The sketch changed everything. Margaret's discovery of Lucas's drawing lit a fuse, and Ethan could feel the explosion coming. He avoided her for days, dodging her calls and staying late at the campaign office to delay the inevitable confrontation. But how do you outrun someone who shaped your entire world? How do you face a truth that could shatter it? One evening, Margaret summoned Ethan to the mansion's library, a room lined with leather-bound books and the weight of her expectations. She sat behind her desk, the sketch laid out like a piece of evidence in a trial. "Explain this," she said, her voice low and dangerous. Ethan's mouth went dry. He wanted to tell her everything, to confess his love for Lucas, to beg for her understanding, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he mumbled, "It's just a drawing." Margaret's eyes flashed. "Don't lie to me, Ethan. I know what this is." Did she? Or was she daring him to confirm her worst fears? The conversation spiraled. Margaret's questions grew sharper, her tone more accusing. "You're throwing away everything we've built," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "Do you have any idea what this could do to us?" Ethan's heart sank. This wasn't about him, it was about her campaign, her image, her power. Could she ever see him as more than a prop in her story? Could he make her understand? Desperate to escape, Ethan fled to Lucas's apartment. There, in the safety of Lucas's arms, he broke down. "She'll never accept me," he sobbed. Lucas held him, his voice steady. "You don't need her to. You're enough." But was he? Ethan had spent his life chasing his mother's approval. Without it, who was he? The question gnawed at him as he clung to Lucas, the one person who saw him for who he was. The next morning, Ethan woke to a barrage of texts from Margaret's campaign manager. A tabloid had caught wind of his mystery friend, and rumors were swirling. Margaret called an emergency meeting, dragging Ethan into a war room filled with advisors. "We need to control this," she said, her voice clipped. "You'll issue a statement denying everything." Ethan's stomach churned. Deny Lucas. Deny himself. How could he do that without losing the one thing that made him feel whole? He refused. For the first time, he stood up to her. "I'm not lying anymore," he said, his voice shaking but resolute. The room fell silent. Margaret's face was a mask of fury and betrayal. "You're choosing him over your family?" she asked, her words cutting deep. Ethan didn't answer, but his silence spoke volumes. What does it mean to choose yourself when it means losing everything else? Could he bear the cost? Margaret's response was swift and brutal. She cut Ethan off Rose's accounts, canceled his access to the family estate, and barred him from campaign events. "If you want to live this way," she said, "you're no son of mine." The words hit like a physical blow. Ethan was alone, cast out from the only world he'd ever known. But as he stood on the street outside the mansion, a strange clarity settled over him. He was free, but at what price? Could he rebuild a life from the ashes of his mother's rejection? Lucas was there, as always, offering a place to stay and a shoulder to lean on. But the weight of Margaret's disownment was crushing. Ethan wrestled with guilt, wondering if he'd made the right choice. Every news outlet buzzed with speculation about the senator's troubled son, and Margaret's campaign leaned into the narrative, painting Ethan as a wayward child misled by dangerous influences. The betrayal stung, but it also ignited something in Ethan's determination to reclaim his story. How do you fight back when the person you love is trying to erase you? What does it take to stand tall in the face of rejection? By the end of part 3, Ethan was adrift, but not broken. He moved in with Lucas, and together they began to navigate a world that felt both terrifying and liberating. But Margaret wasn't done. Her campaign was faltering, and she needed a scapegoat. Ethan was about to learn just how far his mother would go to protect her empire. Could he find the strength to keep fighting? What would it take to prove that love was stronger than power? Living with Lucas was both a refuge and a reckoning. Ethan's days were no longer dictated by campaign schedules or his mother's demands. But the freedom came with a cost. The tabloids were relentless, spinning stories of scandal and rebellion. Margaret's campaign painted Ethan as a traitor, a confused young man led astray. Each headline felt like a knife, twisting deeper. How do you rebuild when the world you knew is trying to erase you? Could Ethan find a way to define himself beyond his mother's shadow? Lucas was his anchor, but even their love was tested. The constant media scrutiny made it hard to leave the apartment, and Ethan's guilt weighed heavily. "I've dragged you into this," he told Lucas one night, staring at the city lights from their tiny balcony. Lucas shook his head. "We're in this together," he said, his voice fierce with conviction. But Ethan wondered, could love survive the pressure of a world determined to tear them apart? What does it mean to hold on when everything is pulling you apart? Margaret's next move was a masterstroke of cruelty. At a televised press conference, she tearfully recounted how her son had lost his way, blaming outside influences for his confusion. She never named Lucas, but the implication was clear. The crowd ate it up, and her poll numbers surged. Ethan watched the broadcast in horror, his mother's words cutting deeper than any disownment. She wasn't just rejecting him, she was rewriting his story to save her own. How do you fight a lie when it's told by someone you once trusted? Could Ethan reclaim his truth before it was buried? Desperate for a way forward, Ethan reached out to an old college friend, Sarah, a journalist with a small but growing online platform. Sarah listened as Ethan poured out his story, her eyes wide with empathy. "This could change things," she said, "but it's a risk. Are you ready to go public?" The question hit Ethan like a wave. Going public meant exposing his mother's hypocrisy, but it also meant baring his soul to a world that might not care. Could he take that leap? What would it cost to tell his truth? With Lucas's encouragement, Ethan agreed. Sarah's article, titled "The Senator's Son Speaks Out," was raw and unflinching. It detailed Ethan's journey, his love for Lucas, and Margaret's betrayal. The piece went viral, sparking heated debates online. Some called Ethan brave, others called him a disgrace. Margaret's campaign scrambled to respond, issuing vague statements about family privacy. But the damage was done. The public was beginning to see the cracks in her perfect facade. Could this be the turning point? Or had Ethan just painted a bigger target on his back? Margaret's retaliation was swift. She hired a private investigator to dig into Lucas's past, unearthing old arrests for minor protests, nothing serious, but enough to spin a narrative of dangerous radicalism. The tabloids ran with it, painting Lucas as a predator who'd corrupted the senator's son. Ethan was furious, but Lucas remained calm. "They can say what they want," he said. "They can't take away who we are." His strength gave Ethan hope. But the question lingered: how do you fight a machine that thrives on lies? Could love be enough to overcome it? As the campaign season heated up, Ethan and Lucas found unexpected allies. A local LGBTQ+ advocacy group reached out, offering support and a platform to share their story. At a small rally in D.C., Ethan spoke publicly for the first time, his voice shaking but clear. "I'm not my mother's son anymore," he said. "I'm my own man, and I'm proud of who I love." The crowd cheered, and for the first time, Ethan felt a flicker of belonging. But could this community sustain him? What does it mean to find a new family when your own has cast you out? By the end of Part 4, Ethan was no longer the senator's golden son. He was a man fighting for his truth, with Lucas by his side and a growing community behind him. But Margaret's campaign was far from over, and she had one final card to play, a move that would test Ethan's resolve like never before. Could he hold on to his newfound strength? What would it take to prove that love could triumph over power? The final weeks of the campaign were a battlefield. Margaret's poll numbers wavered as Ethan's story gained traction, but she was a master strategist. At a rally in Virginia, she delivered her most devastating blow, a public apology. Not to Ethan, but to her supporters. "I failed as a mother," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But I won't fail you. I'll fight for our values, no matter the cost." The crowd roared, and Ethan, watching from Lucas's apartment, felt his heart break all over again. How do you heal when the person who hurt you most refuses to see you? Could Ethan ever find peace? Margaret's apology was a calculated move, designed to win back her base while distancing herself from Ethan. But it backfired. Activists flooded social media with messages of support for Ethan, using hashtags like GoldenSon and LoveWins. The narrative was shifting, and Margaret's campaign began to falter. Ethan, bolstered by this unexpected support, decided to confront his mother one last time. Could he reach her? Not as the senator, but as his mother. Was there any part of her that still loved him? The meeting took place at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in Alexandria. Margaret arrived alone, her face a mask of exhaustion and resolve. "What do you want from me, Ethan?" she asked, her voice brittle. For the first time, Ethan saw her not as a senator, but as a woman grappling with her own fears. "I want you to see me," he said. "Not your golden son, but me." He told her about Lucas, about the love that had given him courage, about the pain of her rejection. Margaret listened, her expression unreadable. Could she change? Or was her world too rigid to bend? The conversation was raw, painful, and unresolved. Margaret didn't apologize, but she didn't attack either. "I need time," she said before leaving. Ethan wasn't sure what that meant, but it was the first crack in her armor. For the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope, not for reconciliation, but for closure. Could he let go of the need for her approval? What does it mean to love someone who may never love you back? Election day came, and Margaret lost by a narrow margin. The media attributed her defeat to the scandal surrounding Ethan, but he knew it was more than that. Her campaign had been built on division, and the world was changing. Ethan and Lucas watched the results together, holding hands in their small apartment. "We did this," Lucas whispered, and Ethan smiled, feeling the weight of his journey settle into something like peace. Could this be enough? Could love and truth be their own victory? In the months that followed, Ethan built a new life. He and Lucas moved to a small house in the Virginia countryside, far from the spotlight. Ethan began working with the advocacy group that had supported him, helping others tell their stories. He didn't hear from Margaret again, but he learned to live with that silence. He had Lucas, their chosen family, and a sense of self he'd never known before. What does it mean to be whole? For Ethan, it meant embracing his truth, no matter the cost. The story of Ethan and Lucas wasn't just about love, it was about the courage to claim your place in a world that tries to erase you. It was about the power of truth, the pain of rejection, and the hope that comes from standing tall. As Ethan looked out at the lake where they'd shared their first kiss, he knew he'd made the right choice. Could anyone ask for more than that? To live, to love, to be free, what greater victory is there?